So little coffee break, break there. Okay, where was I? Okay. As far as or so far, how is some of that sounding to you?
I'm not necessarily okay with increasing the amount of alcohol permitted and increasing the maximum amount of students allowed. The main thing that I'm concerned with is, I personally am concerned with is the enforcement of these things. I feel like no matter what a college handbook says about how your party should be conducted, I feel like nobody really listens to that. From my own personal experience and just from reading all of these things, if someone says a party should be over by 1, I don't think anyone's thinking, oh, I have to get everyone, like, no one's actively thinking, I have to get everyone out of here by 1,
Right.
or I have to make sure everyone, consumes only this much alcohol and only like people that are coming in are only 21 or and over or things like that. So I was thinking of doing something like maybe making sure that at least one of the hosts of the party is sober, like that they're required to be sober, so that that's the person that's checking through the doors or things like that. I think that was also listed in, I don't know if it's one of the ones that I printed out. I think that was Tufts or Babson. One of them said that all of their registered parties do have to have at least one sober host present that should be making sure that parties end on time, there aren't more than the maximum allowable people, things about alcohol consumption, the number of drinks someone is consuming, things like that. Again, I do think it's a little bit unrealistic just because I don't think one person can control 30 whatever people. And I think the enforcement is the biggest issue because you can say like, oh, you can only have 30 people, you can only have 45 people, you can only have 1 keg or 2 kegs.
Mm-hmm.
I think regardless, people are going to be drinking beforehand, people will be drinking after the fact.
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I definitely see where you're coming from, but I'm not sure if I agree with that. I feel like okay, so you definitely no increase on the guests is kind of where you're at, which I guess we can talk about that further. But like, okay, so let's say we kept it at 30 guests, but still, like, for me, I really kind of want to push the 2 kegs because I really think like allowing students to have 2 kegs, I think shows we trust you and we know that you're responsible people and that you should be able to, as 21-year-old adults who can drink, handle your alcohol and be responsible. And we're giving you this kind of gift of saying we trust you. Don't break that trust. And that's why I would agree with maybe having a higher financial fine or having stricter enforcement of stricter punishment if you break these things. And maybe, like you said as well, it's not reasonable for students to have a 1 o'clock curfew. That's really early. So maybe going to 2 o'clock. And in that sense, again, the party's extended. There's, longer time that people can be drinking. So they're not trying to chug beers in the first, chug their cups of beer in the first hour of the party.
Right.
So I mean, let's say we kept it at a 30-person capacity. And did you see kind of where I'm coming from? That like the interest for both of us here is like being reasonable about students drinking, and if they had a stricter, let's say every person has to sign that resident. What is it on the background? Residence hall, like requests, whatever thing.
It's the party whenever they register for the event, they have to sign.
Yeah, and like if the hosts had to check IDs of everyone at the doors and only people that were 21 were allowed to come in, and I could definitely agree with a host being sober or maybe being limited to 1 or 2 drinks throughout the night, or maybe sober is like safer, and having still all the food and non-alcoholic beverages. I feel like that just creates a more responsible atmosphere because, as we know as college students, when something's completely taken away from you, authority just means then almost less, because then you say, oh well, screw that, I'm just gonna drink as much as I want. Okay, fine, we won't bring anything to the party, but we'll hide it in our shirts or we'll hide it in the bathroom so that if we get shut down, I just think giving a little bit more of a reasonable allowance, but maybe being stricter if they break it, because it's like we're giving you this responsibility because we trust you, and so you should be able to follow it because this isn't that difficult to follow.
Yeah.
And maybe having stricter, some of these stricter fines and punishments.
How would you feel about, in terms of enforcement, how would you feel about if we do extend like the time of the party? How would you feel about someone maybe checking in after midnight, like maybe every hour after midnight, like maybe one at 1 o'clock, or 1 or 2? It wouldn't have to be like a police officer, maybe like like an RA, just checking, like dropping by and saying like, okay, I just want to make sure that everyone here is 21, or just like checking in to see that nothing's going wrong and people aren't too drunk.
Interesting. Again, I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, so I don't want to make any yes or no to that immediately, but I feel that kind of, again, makes students feel as though they're still kids and that they have to be checked up on and that they aren't trusted to, I just think that the more of that's done, I mean, I'm just not sure.
So
like
it would be by a student.
It would be a student?
Yeah, I was saying like an RA or someone not campus police. And then if the RA does feel that, okay, this could be getting out of hand.
What does that mean? They get to go in and
like you know how over
around,
here an RA like knocks on the doors as if he like it's just a warning, like keep the voice level down or the noise level down, and quiet hours begin at whatever time.
So it's standard no matter what.
Yeah.
This would be happening.
So just saying that like they just check in, like open the door, they'll knock on the door, open the door, like just the rooms are pretty small as it is, so just to kind of gauge the general level of the party and see like, okay, it's getting a little rowdy. Maybe I do need to get maybe the residence director here to see if it's getting too out of hand. And if it's not, which it most likely won't be, then they can just walk away. But if it is, and there is a danger to students.
So it would be at 1.
Like
if we were to extend it, and if we were to have, let's say one more keg allowed, it would be 12 and 1.
Yeah, I would say like 1 at 12, 1 at 1, and then maybe like 1 a little bit sooner after that, like at 1:30 or something, or 2.
Also,
just to make
how
sure
does that
everyone's
logistically fit into the schedules of the RA?
I mean, I think I personally don't have the schedule of the RAs,
But
I mean, they have to make rounds regardless.
Yeah.
It would just help.
Well, what if there is no noise that you can even hear outside of the door? They still are forced to go in. I just feel like that's kind of an invasion of students.
Well, I mean, it would just be like a knock on the door. Like if it is a registered event, then someone knows, okay, that there is a party supposed to be going on here.
Right.
If they just knock on the door and say like, oh, like how's the party going? Is there anything you need help with?
And if they can tell that someone's if
wrong.
there's someone screaming. Okay.
Then they can check in. It wouldn't be like, oh, let me come in, make sure ID everyone.
Okay, or like check. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like they could just check in with like the sober host and say, like how are things going? It would just be like a friendly conversation.
Check in with the sober host. Yeah. That's reasonable.
And then in terms of the second keg, I was thinking, I feel like a keg is so big, it's such a large amount, like quantity of drinks present. How would you feel about maybe like a liter of a different kind of alcohol? Because I don't know how people are about like beer. I mean, I don't like beer. Some people prefer something else, so they might be more inclined to drink before they come. So if you have like 1 beer and maybe like a liter of a different kind of alcohol present, so they can make.
I just think that
beverages.
There's something about this that I've thought about it a lot. I just think that beer, first of all, is one of the lowest alcohol contents of all alcoholic drinks.
Yeah.
So I think that it's not that hard to get really, really wasted off of beer for students. I just think when you're involving hard I personally think hard alcohol shouldn't be allowed at all. Because I think that's when people get taking shots. I think that's when it would get out of hand, when an RA is checking in at 1 o'clock. If people have been drinking hard alcohol, and then how do you monitor how much each person drinks of that? What if someone, pours themselves a whole cup? I don't know. I see where you're coming from, but I really do think that having 2 kegs, you can see it. It's a set amount of alcohol. Because then if you say, cans, bottles, 30 racks, again, that's kind of ambiguous. I kind of just feel like it honestly is the way to limit it the most and have, the lowest amount of an alcoholic beverage offered. And it's not a ridiculous 2 to 3 glasses a person, which is just